Hey everybody, so as you probably know, it is Pride Month here in the United States. The month of June, Pride Month. And I'm coming to you with a video to share some Pride reading recommendations. I know I'm a little late, but that doesn't mean these books can't be read all year long. So let's get started, because I have a stack to tell you about. Hi everybody and welcome back to my channel. It's Russell with Ink and Paper Blog. How are you all doing? As always, I hope you are safe, I hope you are healthy, and I hope you guys are getting some amazing reading in. I hope your families are safe and healthy and also getting some reading in. As I said, it is Pride Month here, which usually for me means that I associate that with it being warm, because it is hot as heck outside right now. It is in the 90s, so I have my air conditioning on, our windows are all closed. It's a good thing we can't go many places because it's too hot to go outside. But that does mean that we can get some good old-fashioned reading in. And so I'm super excited to share with you guys some of Pride reading recommendations. I have to tell you, to be honest, it was darn near impossible to make this list because I always felt like I was going to leave someone out. And eventually I just had to walk away because I couldn't have everybody I wanted to talk about in this video. So as much as I wanted to include Jacqueline Woodson and Carmen Maria Machado and Alexander Chee and so many others, I had to do some culling. And this video is still going to be really long because I have so many books to tell you about. So as always, please get out your pen, get out your paper, get out your Goodreads, however you keep track of your TBR. If you are able to order these books from your local independent bookstore, please do so. The authors and the bookstores appreciate it. If you are a library user, I hope your libraries are open, but if they're not, I know they are probably digitally open. However you're getting a hold of your books, I hope you can get a hold of these. So let's get started, because really this video could be very, very long. I'm going to try to be very short and concise, but you know that's not my strength. I've separated this into 4 sections. I'm going to do some nonfiction, I'm going to do some fiction, I'm going to do some fantasy, and then I'm going to do some YA or middle grade reads. So there you go. The first book I'm going to talk about, I'm going to start in nonfiction, is a memoir, and that is Genderqueer by Maia Kobabe. This is out from LionForge Press, and this is a memoir about them, coming to terms with their genderqueer identity. Good. Okay, so I'm trying really hard. Maia uses the pronouns am, and er, and I'm doing my best to do that in my head, so I apologize if I make any sort of errors. I read this right when I got it. I actually got it at Book Expo America last year, and I loved it. Do the art, and then Air's sister does all the coloring, and the art is just beautiful. And I think that you'll learn a lot about a different type of queer identity in this memoir. This is not sort of a book that you will run into every day, and Air's story is different and informative and heartwarming and just plain lovely in so many ways. I really enjoyed it. So that is Genderqueer, a memoir by Maia Kobabe, out from LionForge. Okay, next is a book that I've talked about so much on this channel, but I just feel like I need to throw it in there again, just in case you're one of the few people that didn't pick it up because I told you about it, and that's the memoir, How We Fight for Our Lives by Saeed Jones, the memoir of an African-American man living in Texas who winds up going to college in Western Kentucky and his sort of sexual awakening. Also, it's about his relationship with his mother. There's a lot in this. It's a heavy book. It's dark. It is got some things for trigger warnings, sexual abuse, and also some very tense scenes between him and some of the men he interacts with. But it also has a lot of hope, a lot of humor, and a lot of heart. And it is lovely and beautiful and everything you will want if you are looking for a fantastic queer memoir. And that is How We Fight for Our Lives by Saeed Jones. And this one is out from Simon & Schuster, I believe. Yes. Simon & Schuster. Okay. Another book that I've talked about in the last few videos, so I'm not going to say much, is My Autobiography of Carson McCullers by Jenn Shapland. I'm just addicted to this book. I keep recommending it to people. It is Jenn's dive into the relationships Carson McCullers had with women, as she also talks to us about her own sexual coming out and coming to identify as a lesbian, and sort of how that changes her as she goes through this investigative part for Carson McCullers. It is fantastic. It's told in a sort of poetic mode. It is beautifully written. I hope everybody reads this one. I really loved it. That's My Autobiography of Carson McCullers by Jenn Shapland, out from Tin House. Okay, now I'm getting into, I'll do the ones that I read and then the one that I haven't read. The next one is How to Survive a Plague, the inside story of how citizens in science tamed AIDS by David Francis. This is out from Knopf. This is a beast of a book, but it is informative and interesting, and you will learn so much about the AIDS epidemic in the United States, and you will learn so much about how the politics around it, the social media around it, and I say social media, it didn't exist in the same term that we call social media, but also just general media, I guess, science, how people responded, and what was sort of the overall reaction and in the United States. I hope that's not as great as I wanted to sell this book. This is for you if you are one of those hardcore, well-written, great story, but factual, historical nonfictions. This I know this will hit a sweet spot for some of you. So that's How to Survive a Plague, the inside story of how citizens in science tamed AIDS by David France, and this is out from Knopf. I hope this came out in paperback for you guys, because the hardback is quite a hefty book. Okay, so the last book in nonfiction is one that my husband bought me for my birthday, and it's called The Deviant War, The Homosexual versus the United States of America by Eric Cervini, and this is out by FSG. So let's just take a moment, because that is a gorgeous cover. And this is the story of Frank Kameny, Kameny, K-A-M-E-N-Y. He is, in the 1950s, he is a young astronomer. He works for the U.S. Department of Defense in Hawaii, and one day he's called to Washington, D.C. as part of McCarthy's Lavender Scare. And when he brought in all of these people and that he believed to be, or actually were, homosexuals, and gets them discharged from the military. And that's what winds up happening. This Frank winds up losing his job in the government, and he becomes one of the first crusaders for gay rights in America. And what this says, it says, is that we follow Kameny as he explores the underground gay scenes of Boston and Washington, D.C., where he formulates his arguments against the federal government's classification of gay men and women as sexual perverts. At a time when staying in the closet remained the default, he exposed the hypocrisies of the American establishment, accelerated a broader revolution in sexual morals, and invented what we know now as gay pride. So I've actually started this one, and I'm, I don't know, like 20, 30 pages into it. Really well written, a great story. I think Frank is going to be one of those characters where you feel like you're reading his story, you're there with him. Has a very sort of narrative feel to it, but it is clearly well researched. There's a lot of detail. I thought this was quite, I laughed a little bit actually. This is the notes section of the book. So Eric clearly did his research and gives you a bunch of different places that you could go. So that's The Deviant War, The Homosexual versus the United States of America by Eric Cervini, out from FSG. You can get your hands on it now. Thank you, Dan, for the birthday present. Okay, let's go on to fiction, and I'm going to need to pick up the pace, or this video is going to be so long. I have raved about Cleanness by Garth Greenwell. It is a phenomenal novel. It is the story of a young teacher in Bulgaria, who is getting ready to come home to the United States. And it sort of chronicles in different chapters his relationships with different people, men, sexual relationships, romantic relationships. It is vividly sexual, vividly aware of itself, but also so poetic and so beautifully written, and everything you would need in fantastic American literature. Love it. Love it. And that's Cleanness by Garth Greenwell, out from FSG as well. Okay. Next is a graphic novel that I know probably a lot of people have read, and that is Blue is the Warmest Color by Julia Maroh. And this is translated, and you know what, I was looking at this yesterday, the translator is like hidden on like the 4th page, by Ivanka Honenberger. And this one is a graphic novel about a relationship between two women. It is beautifully drawn and beautifully told. And it is also a fantastic film. So if you want to read this and then watch the film, you sort of can do a double do when it comes to celebrating some different parts of Pride Month. And yeah, highly recommend. There's nothing to say about this other than you should certainly read it. And that is Blue is the Warmest Color by Julia Maroh. Again, translated, I believe, from the French by Ivanka Honenberger. So, yes, love it. It's so good, you guys. Okay. I am currently reading The Prettiest Star by Carter Sickles. This is the story of a young man in the early 1980s who is in New York City. His partner has passed away from AIDS. The city is being ravaged by the disease. He is from a small town in Ohio where he decides to return after years of being away with very little contact to his family, basically to die, because he has AIDS as well, and he has already dealt with being in the hospital and being out, so he returns home. And this is about his relationships with his family, with his town, with himself. I am halfway through this book, and it is phenomenal. So, highly recommend The Prettiest Star by Carter Sickles, out from Hub City Press. I hope that we will see that book everywhere come award season. The next book out from Dutton is All My Mother's Lovers by Ilana Masad. This is the story of a young queer woman who is, at the very beginning of the book, is awakened by a phone call, and it is to tell her her mother has passed away unexpectedly. And she goes home for the funeral. Her family is sort of a wreck, and she finds a will and testament from her mother that includes 5 letters to 5 different men that she does not know. So she goes on a road trip to deliver these letters by hand, and hope in meeting these men she learns something about her mom. But it is also about the mother and daughter relationship after the daughter comes out as queer, what that sort of did, the distance. There's still connection. They clearly loved each other, but their relationship, what did have a separation after her coming out, and she deals with that as well. I'm halfway through this one as well. You can tell I'm reading a bunch right now, and I think it is fantastic. And I want to say that Alana, she works for BuzzFeed. I think I've read stuff on BuzzFeed from her. And she's also getting her PhD from the University of Nebraska, Lincoln. So there you go. So that's All My Mother's Lovers, out from Dutton by Ilana Masad. Excellent, excellent book. A book that I have raved about, and you guys should already have read, but if you haven't, please read Carolina de Robertis's Tortoise, out from Knopf. This is the story of 5 queer women in Uruguay who, in the 1970s, they are completely under lockdown due to a dictatorship, but they find space to create their own sense of community and the relationships they have with each other. It goes through times as the relationships develop. We learn more and more about these women. There is tragedy. I bawled my eyes out at part of this book, but in the same time, it's about the hope and love of what queer people had to do at certain times in the world, where they had to create their own community in order to have a sense of self within a community that did not accept them. It's beautiful written. I also listened to the audiobook of this as well, and Carolina reads it. It's so good, you guys. So that is Carolina del Robertis's Tortoise, out from Knopf, and I highly, highly recommend it. Take in my last fiction, guys, and that is On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. I will be honest with you, when I first read this book, it didn't I didn't feel as passionate about it as I expected myself to. This is the story of a young Vietnamese boy in the United States, his relationship with his mother. It's told as a letter to his mother, and it's about their relationship, but also about him coming out to her and how that changes or did not change, or how that dynamic occurs within their relationship. And it's a love letter of a son to his mom in a lot of ways. Ocean is a poet by trade. You will absolutely see it in the writing. The writing is absolutely beautiful. It doesn't have a lot of plot, and it sort of goes all over the place, which at times I found confusing. But the more I reflect on this book, the more I realize its brilliance. And I think that when you realize that a book has stuck in your head as long as Ocean's book has stuck in mine, it must have meant something to you. And that's where I'm at with it. I think I need a reread. I think I need to go into it with sort of the adoration I have now. And I think it will just blow me away. But I definitely talk and think about this book a lot. And that's On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. Okay, that was fiction and nonfiction. We're going to go on to fantasy, and I actually only have 2 to discuss in this group. The first one is Black Leopard, Red Wolf by Marlon James, and I know a lot of people tried to read this, had issues with this book because it is dense, and it is definitely got a lot going on. It is a fantasy novel, sort of an African quest story. It has a lot of characters and stuff, but it is phenomenal. And the world building and the characters and the people and the story is so good. But if you want to break this book down, this is really the story of one man and his search for relationships to add meaning to his life, and what happens when those people are taken away, and how that affects him in a lot of ways, and how relationships, as they change, turn him into the man he is going to be. I will give a little bit of a warning on this one. There is some graphic sex in it, which, if that is not your cup of tea, I wouldn't say stay away, but I'd just be cognizant of it. You may need to skip a little bit. I don't think this is a novel that I would give to young readers just because it is graphic, but I think unless you've read it first and you're comfortable giving that to your child. But I loved it. I cannot wait for the next book to come out, and I think about it all the time. So that's Black Leopard, Red Wolf by Marlon James, out from Riverhead. Love it so much. The next one is actually a quartet, and that is the Elemental series. I think it's called the Elemental Logic novels, and that is Fire Logic, Earth Logic, Water Logic, Air Logic by Laurie J. Marks. I read 2 of the 4 of these, and they are phenomenal. Impossible to summarize. Impossible. Here's what you've got. You got strong queer representation. You have strong characters, a great world, a fantastic backstory, an adventure that you will want to go on. You will totally buy into the main characters. You will love their world and their relationships. You will ache when they ache, and you will just love this series. I'm telling you. So it's all four out. This is actually a reissue by Small Beer Press. You can get your hands on them. I can't imagine the last 2 are going to let me down, because I loved the first 2 so much. They are hefty, by the way. And that is the Elemental Logic books by Laurie J. Marks. And this is the Small Beer Press editions. I'm just going to hold up because the covers are just gorgeous on these. I know, that was pretty fast, but so worth it. So good. And I'm trying to make sure this video does not get way too long. Let's do my 2 middle grade YA reads. Middle grade. I have talked about this book, and I know a lot of people have read it, but I was just reading an article the other day where schools were trying to ban this book, and it made me so angry. And that is George by Alex Gino. Now, I met Alex at a book signing here in Santa Clara, California, near where I live, and they were amazing. This is the story of George. George is a little girl. Let me try to figure out how I'm going to say that again. This is the story of a little boy in elementary school that knows deep inside that he's really a little girl. So we're going to say George is a little girl. George wants more than anything to be the lead and play the lead in Charlotte Web, the play, and he wants to play Charlotte. And by the middle of the book, George has moved into a space where he feels comfortable with certain people explaining his identity. And she becomes the person. She becomes the center of the book. And she is lovely. And I'm struggling a little bit because I think that the book does change gender in it. George starts as a little boy, but he knows inside that he is really a little girl, and eventually comes to terms with that and becomes a little girl. And I apologize. I know that he eventually takes a little girl's name, but I've read this book so long ago, I cannot remember the name that he takes. But I will tell you this. This book will tear you up inside, but it will also make you so hopeful. And Alex Gino does an amazing job. They're just a lovely middle grade writer. And they do a great job of telling a story that is complex, but also easy to understand and easy to feel. So yeah, that's George by Alex Gino, and it is phenomenal. Highly recommend it. Okay, last but not least, if you're going for some YA teen fantasy and you want to go queer, I'm highly recommending, if you guys, here, let me put them in order. Girls of Paper and Fire and Girls of Storm and Shadow, book 1 and book 2 in the, I don't know what the name of the series is. All I know is that I love them, by Natasha Nagan. These books are phenomenal. Our main character is a young woman who is a human in a world that has different, has humans, it has jinn who are like half human, half animal, and that has demons that are all animal, and they are in charge of the world. Humans are sort of the lowest. At the beginning of the first book, she is taken to the castle to be a consort to the king. She meets a young woman, their relationship takes off, and it's all about rebellion and fighting for the freedoms of her people, and also the relationship she has with the woman she's in love with. I loved these books. I have flown through both of them. I cannot wait for book 3. Natasha knows this. I've met Natasha now. I met her at Book Expo last year, and I'm totally obsessed with her, and I think she is phenomenal, and I cannot wait. And there's so much good queer representation in here. There's lesbians, there's gay couples, there's people that have, very fluid gender identities, and it is lovely, and it's well told, and it is just what you need if you are just like a fan of YA fantasy books, great told stories with great characters. So that is Girls of Paper and Fire and Girls of Storm and Shadow. Highly recommend them. Look at how beautiful these covers are. Just how beautiful. I cannot recommend them enough. So that was a lot of books for 22 minutes, and it's going to be a little bit over, but I hope that some of these books wind up on your TBR. Please order them. Support the authors if you are so able. I know it's a tough time for a lot of people, but if you can't order them, try to get them for your library. Show people some love that way. Get your libraries to order them for you if you can. I know that books have really gotten me through some of the tough parts of this entire experience we've been having for the last months. As always, if you're a return subscriber, I could not do this without you. Thank you so very, very much. If are you new to my channel, I hope you subscribe, and I hope you stick around and you talk about books. I love to talk about them. Talk in the comments, email me. As always, I encourage you to read globally, shop locally. Until next time, I wish you happy reading. Bye.